Hold on a second.
Good morning. Well, I must say it's a beautiful campus because I got a lovely tour. Thank you. Not that I wanted to delay me from being here, but on top of that, there were all kinds of road blockages coming from Litchfield to Torrington to Farmington. So please excuse me because I hate to be late. But needless to say, we're here and that's the important thing. So welcome everyone to the meeting, and I would ask the secretary to please call the roll.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
Present.
Regent Balducci. Here. Regent Bloom. Here. Regent Guay.
Present.
Regent James.
Present.
Regent Jappanen.
Present.
Regent McCarthy. Absence is noted. Regent Porth. Student Regent Sanchez. Absence is noted. Regent Santiago.
Here.
Regent Stewart.
Here.
Regent Wright. Regent Yang.
Here.
Our ex officios, Professor Cunningham.
Here.
Professor Sasanker. Absence is noted. Commissioner Bartolomeo. Absence is noted. Commissioner Dutani. Absence is noted. Commissioner O'Keefe. Absence is noted. Commissioner Russell Tucker.
Present.
Chief Workforce Officer Valeries.
Present.
And our presidents, our host, President Zolmatoro. Here. Interim President Smith.
Here.
President Klonowski.
Here.
Interim President Singh. Here. Incoming President Ismaili.
Here.
President Maduko.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. The agenda is adopted. Welcome everyone to the last board meeting of the 2023-2024 academic year. As we put another year behind us, I'd like to extend the board's continued gratitude to the CSCU community for their contributions and sacrifices over the past year. And as you have heard by now, I do have some bittersweet news to share. But as our agenda is full, I'd like to proceed with the business at hand and ask the board's indulgence for a few minutes at the end of the meeting to share some thoughts. Today we have a number of substantive issues up for vote, not the least of which is the fiscal year 2025 spending plan. Thanks to the committees, our ex officio members, and the system office staff for all the work put in to develop the measures before us today. Now to Chancellor Chang for your comments.
Thank you, Chair Ryan. I appreciate that. Today is bittersweet. It's Joanne Ryan's last meeting as chair of the Board of Regents. Since her appointment as chair in 2022, Joanne has been a guiding light during these, at times, very trying moments of transition. She's helped to guide the merger of our 12 community colleges and the accreditation of CT State Community College, which is now New England's largest community college. And this has created more opportunity for countless individuals and allows us to be more responsive to the workforce needs of the state. And following the COVID-19 pandemic, Joanne also helped to get our students back to school, back into classrooms and on their campuses safely. And these were not easy feats, but Joanne handled all of this with grace and always put the needs of our students, our faculty, and our staff first. During her time as chair, one of the initiatives Joanne championed was bridging the gap between our business and education communities. As president of the Northwest Chamber of Commerce, that's right, she has been having more than a full-time job while also doing this incredible amount of service for our board and our system. Joanne understands the importance of partnership between higher education and business communities, as our colleges and universities are key economic drivers for the state. She's also leveraged the power and the size of the CSCU system to create more efficiencies and to push innovation. So if we look back at these past few years, there's a lot for us to be really proud of. and Joanne is at the heart of some of the biggest accomplishments and achievements. So Joanne, on behalf of obviously myself and my administration and all of our leaders, thank you for the incredible work you've done on behalf of our students, our institutions, and the system. And we literally wouldn't be where we are today without your leadership. So can we please give Joanne a round of applause?
Thank you, Chancellor Chang.
Absolutely. So to build on all the incredible work that Joanne has done as our chair, and that the entire board, the progress the entire board has made, we're really excited that Governor Lamont has appointed Regent Marty Guay as the Board of Regents' next board chair. And Marty's experience in workforce development, economic development, and advanced manufacturing strategies, all of this is going to play a huge role in shaping the future of the CSCU system. Marty understands that one of Connecticut's greatest assets is our highly educated, highly trained citizenry, and he is committed to ensuring that everyone today can, and generations to come will, have the skills, training, resources, and experience they need to secure good-paying jobs and careers in high-demand sectors after they receive their degrees or certificates from a CSCU institution. I look forward to working really closely with Marty and the board on priorities such as increasing accessibility, strengthening our retention efforts and boosting our completion rates, and improving our employment pathways, because ultimately our students are so talented, they're so incredible, they're hardworking, and they deserve to have really great jobs when they graduate, and we're really committed to that. Marty, thank you for taking on this new role and helping us as we continue to chart a new path forward. So a quick round of applause for Marty as well, please. So a quick aside, so I have two daughters, and they're both theater kids, even though I don't know where that comes from, to be quite honest with you. They just love theater. They memorize lines like instantaneously. And after every one of their performances, they do something called the Paper Plate Awards, right? And that's a recognition of all the contributors for the entire production. So I don't have paper plates, but I'm going to kind of do my own version of Paper Plate Awards for the board, okay? Because our board is remarkable. Our board does so much work, and I don't think they hear the appreciation publicly or privately that they really deserve, because folks, they don't get paid for this work, okay? And they put in countless hours, and they go through a lot to serve this institution. So I'm going to start with Regent Balducci. So Regent Balducci has served on the board the longest, and specifically, Regent Balducci has worked tirelessly and diligently as the chair of the Finance and Administration Subcommittee for many years, and most recently, he's really helped the system navigate some very precarious moments. He's also been a staunch advocate for our system, and specifically for students, as he's used his experience in the state legislature to our advantage. So if we are able to secure the additional $20 million of ARPA funding that is in the recently approved state ARPA spending plan, it will largely be due to Regent Balducci's efforts. And we have every intention of using that $20 million towards tuition relief for our students across the system. But more on that later. I also want to thank the other chairs of our subcommittees, Regents Bloom, Yang, Wright, and Japanet. Regent Bloom, for those of you who have gotten to know him, he pours through every sentence of our academic and student affairs work with a magnifying glass. I think he literally has a magnifying glass. And he goes through every sentence, every comma, every colon to make sure that those proposals and policies are as sharp and as tight as they can be. Regent Yang, we know that he is not shy and that he has made great strides with the Technology Committee to advance our IT and cybersecurity work from both a system and institutional perspective. Regents Wright and Japanen have been instrumental in guiding their committees to ensure due diligence is paid to a myriad of policy and administrative matters that affect all of our employees across the system. So thank you for the time you all have given to your committees and the board. But of course, every region is important, and their contributions are critical to sharpening and improving our work, while also ensuring that we are responsible and accountable financially and operationally. So some of you might know that Regent Stewart, AKA the mayor, has more than a full-time job as a mayor, as a parent, as a leader of her family, but she gives a great deal to the BOR. And we benefit from her political, her operational, and her management acumen. She really brings a lens that very few people can bring to the table. Regent Santiago is similar in that he's CEO of a very successful company in his own right. He's got a lot going on. There's a lot that he's always needing to do for his company, but we're fortunate to have his expertise in business and as an IT expert on our board. Regent James is a longtime nonprofit and corporate leader, and she has incredibly strong ties to higher education. And, you know, I tease her, where is Regent James? Where's she sitting over there? I tease Regent James and I say the only thing she's ever failed at is retirement, because it seems like she's actually even busier now that she's quote unquote retired. And she contributes to multiple committees and to the BOR and overall in so many ways. And I have to say the same about Regent McCarthy. Regent McCarthy has a distinguished career as an academic and administrative leader. He is such an asset to our system. And he too has nearly a full-time job with his contributions as vice chair of the board, but also on the Academic and Student Affairs Committee. Regent Porth is a nonprofit leader. He's incredibly well respected across the state, and he brings this balanced, thoughtful approach and benevolent ethos, and it really permeates this work and enriches the board's conversations and actions in so many different ways. Our student regents aren't here right now, but they're maybe last in this paper plate exercise, but certainly not least. I have to thank Carla Galais and Luis Sanchez. Carla, you might have heard, started at Northwest Connecticut Community College, and she will be going on to Stanford University on a full ride via the Jack Kent Cook Scholarship. That is amazing. She's a wonder, and she's overcome so much in her life, and she still finds remarkable ways to contribute. And so we're going to continue to watch Carla's star rise, and we know that she is so grateful. She's very vocal about this, about how the faculty and the staff and the folks at Northwest Community College have really helped her. And I've also gotten a chance to know Luis Sanchez, and I'm sure that he is not going to stop because he's going to help change CSU for the better, but he's going to have an even greater impact on the world. Because on top of being a role model for his family, he's a role model for all students, especially those who know how hard the path and journey are for minoritized and marginalized students. So I and my team are eternally grateful to our regents for your time, commitment, dedication, passion, and hard work. We know you do all of this for the right reasons and help us do it the right way. And it's a privilege and an honor to work with you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Please join me in giving our regents a round of applause. So to transition to today's board items, before you all today is our spending proposal for FY25. As you know, Governor Lamont recently signed into law legislation that would allocate an additional $80 million in American Rescue Plan Act funding to CSCU. And we're so appreciative, not only for the support that the governor and the legislature have given us in the form of this funding, we're incredibly appreciative of the support that our students, faculty, and staff and administrators have demonstrated. You all came out and made your voices heard throughout the legislative session about the transformative impact that public higher education has had on lives all across our state. So because of your efforts, the General Assembly took up our cause. And our goal is to continue to run at a high and effective pace and continue to do the work that transforms Connecticut and our students. This funding stabilizes our current situation, and it positions us as a system and as institutions to make further changes in the future that will put us on a sustainable path forward. So, to be clear, the $80 million in additional ARPA funds that has been allocated will allow CSCU to address the remaining balance of its budget deficit. It will allow us to cover state-negotiated salary increases for our employees, and it will fund the expansion of Connecticut's free tuition program, previously known as the PACT program. Specifically, $41.5 million will be used to address our budget shortfall. $32.8 million will be used to cover the CBAC wage reopener, and $5.7 million will be allocated to the free tuition program. This is what we began advocating for as early as November 2023, and we have allocated the full amount of this funding as planned. As I mentioned earlier, there is the potential that CSCU will receive an additional $20 million in ARPA funding later this year. If, or I hope when, this funding comes through, we plan to utilize it for tuition relief for students across our system. Unfortunately, we cannot utilize reserves at our institutions for this purpose at this time, as some have requested. As stated by CFO Blanchard and Regent Balducci in the June 12 Finance and Administration Subcommittee meeting, to do so would be imprudent and would jeopardize the financial health and standing of our institutions. CFO Blanchard will speak to this in more detail in his presentation later, but I will repeat that if/when we receive that additional $20 million from the legislature, as currently detailed in the spending bill, we plan to use it for tuition relief. So, in all, our spending plan for FY25 totals $1.2 billion, which is only 1% more than the FY24 budget, with the majority of cost increases due to state negotiated salary increases and fringe cost calculation and methodology. In layman's terms, when you strip away the things that we cannot control, the spending plan shows that our mitigation efforts have us currently on stable financial footing, as each of our universities, CT State Community College and Charter Oak State College, are all expected to have balanced budgets for FY25. So I want to thank CFO Lloyd Blanchard and his team for putting this spending proposal together. Thanks to all of our CFOs across the system and our presidents. I encourage you all to support this plan. You will see the detailed presentation, and I hope the board will vote to approve the plan today. Okay, I'm almost done, I promise. As you may know, over the past few months, CSCU has been working with social impact partners. They're formerly known as SVP Connecticut, on developing and setting future strategic priorities for the CSCU system. And the initiative, which we're announcing today, is called Renew CSCU. Through this partnership, social impact partners will engage with a wide range of stakeholders, including faculty, staff, students, alumni, employers, government officials, and community leaders. And all of this will lead to building a strong investment case for the next biennium budget. It should be noted that Social Impact Partners is providing CSCU with their services pro bono. I believe that next year, Connecticut will have an opportunity to make real strategic long-term investments in our system and our state. This partnership will allow us to build a shared vision with key stakeholders on what investment in higher education looks like and how we can reach that shared North Star together. In addition to engaging stakeholders in developing strategic priorities, Social Impact Partners will also create a plan for how to strengthen education and employment pathways and CSCU's early college and dual enrollment programs. So through these efforts, we hope to give more students a head start and ensure they are ready to succeed at the university level. To date, Social Impact Partners has already engaged with nearly 90 focus groups across the system, 90. Work on Renew CSCU is set to be completed in December of 2024. Okay, so lastly, we are excited to welcome Dr. Karim Ismaili as the next president of Eastern Connecticut State University. He was yielded through an open national search, and we are so happy and so proud to have him coming on board, and he will begin his new role on July 31st. Dr. Ismaili currently serves as Executive Vice President and Provost at Bridgewater State University in Massachusetts, where he has advanced new degree programs based on workforce needs, guided successful interim and comprehensive regional accreditation reviews, and deepened relationships with public and private higher education institutions to build academic pathways. We're excited for him to work with the entire Eastern community and across the state with the CSCU system to build on its success and chart a path forward, especially as we reimagine a liberal arts university for the 21st century. So please join me in welcoming incoming President Dr. Ismaili. So Chair Ryan, that concludes my remarks. And again, I just want to say it's been such a pleasure and honor to be able to work with you and for you and to be able to call you a friend and a mentor, a supporter, and a partner for our time. And again, we can't do what we do without all of you, our regents, our presidents, our faculty, our staff, our students, our administrators. We couldn't do what we do without you. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Chancellor Chang. I'll now ask the Secretary of the Board, Pam Helene, to manage the public comment portion of our meeting. Pam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In addition to the 10 presenters we have today, both in person and virtually, we have received 2 letters from the public, which have been forwarded to the regents in advance of this meeting, and in accordance with the Freedom of Information guidelines. The communications were posted on the CSCU website immediately prior to the meeting start time. With that precursor, I'd like to welcome our first student presenter. Is Natalie Nicholson here? If you could step to the podium, please. She is a student at CT State Manchester. You have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, thank you. Members of the Board of Regents, Chancellor Chang, thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. My name is Natalie Nicholson. I'm a second-year student at CT State Manchester. Having received that additional $80 million to alleviate some of CSU's financial burden in 2025, I'm somewhat disappointed but not surprised to be testifying about the Board of Regents' fiscal year 2025 spending plan. From a somewhat external perspective, obtaining that $80 million in additional ARPA funding seemed like a Herculean feat, and I am immensely proud of the hundreds of people that worked to get us that far. However, after reading the BOR's revised proposals for fiscal year 2025, there's a single question at the forefront of my mind. How exactly is that additional funding being used to directly and materially support students and staff across CSU's 17 campuses? I've always been a consistent advocate of financial transparency, whether it be in the CSU system office, the CT State Community College system office, or now within the Board of Regents. So in the name of that transparency, here are the facts. It has been well documented that in his public statements, reversing tuition increases was a priority for Chancellor Chang. Unfortunately, according to Chancellor Chang's statements today, it sounds like that tuition relief is not currently a reality. Here's what I do know. At CT State Manchester, we don't have recruiters to increase enrollment numbers or the staff necessary to engage in community outreach. Critical student services have been cut, the course catalog has been slashed, and the current tuition hikes necessarily dictate that students are being asked to pay more for less. I cannot stress enough how fundamentally important reversing tuition hikes is for students that are seeking equitable, affordable higher education. The Board of Regents originally lobbied for $47 million, and it received $33 million in surplus of that amount. If we as students are unable to confirm that the multi-million-dollar surplus is being used to our benefit, and while we can visually confirm that the on-campus services many rely on remain underfunded and that tuition hikes have not been reversed, CSU students will continue to lose faith in the BOR and will continue to question whether or not their best interests are being held in the highest regard. Once again, I am urging the Board of Regents to spend that additional funding on what it was originally intended for: CSU staff, CSU services, and CSU students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Professor Christopher Trombley. Are you here in the room? And you may begin.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to seek increased clarity about the proposed spending plan for FY25, on which you're scheduled to vote later this morning. I'll begin by stating for the record that I don't envy you the task of having to prepare and operate within a budget over neither whose revenues nor expenditures you have altogether much control. The budgets that I prepared and managed for nearly a decade and a half as a public school administrator in Massachusetts were both much smaller and far more predictable. Excluding the additional $20 million appropriation that may become available late this fall, should OPM deem those funds available, the Connecticut General Assembly this spring appropriated $80 million beyond what had been included in the biennium budget to the CSCUs. $47.6 million of those dollars were appropriated at your request to cover the deficit remaining after the cuts that had been made as part of the mitigation plans that were put into place at all of the campuses of the system. Another $20 million of those dollars were appropriated to cover the costs that would otherwise have been raised through the increases in tuition that you all had approved earlier this year, so that our students could be spared paying higher tuition and fees for reduced services and more limited schedule options. I know this personally because my CSU AAUB colleagues and I made it our business, between us, to be present in the Capitol on every single day when either or both houses were in session. In each and every conversation that any of us had with lawmakers on those days, their intent was crystal clear: to shield students from the increased costs. The remaining funds were to be used to offset whatever portion of the CBAC wage increases would not be covered by monies from the Reserve for Salary Adjustments, which I understand to have amounted to $14 million. So my confusion stems from the facts that, first, the spending plan as proposed indicates that every dollar of the wage increases, nearly $33 million, is to come from the additional $80 million appropriation. It ignores the fact that $14 million is coming from RSA to cover a not insignificant portion of those costs. And most important, third, it makes no mention whatever of neutralizing the 5% increases in tuition and fees that it had pained you all to approve earlier in the year, and which the General Assembly members were absolutely clear about wanting to spare our students. It seems to me that, at minimum, those $14 million otherwise unaccounted for dollars should be employed to minimize, if not entirely neutralize, the tuition increases. Then, if the additional $20 million materialize in the fall as hoped, those funds can be employed as seems appropriate to you all. It also seems to me that failing to neutralize or at least minimize the tuition hike after the General Assembly have appropriated monies for that aim will compromise lawmakers' trust in the system's leadership, or, still worse, their inclination to be more generous in future appropriations, lest those resources not actually reach our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Elle Vandermark, President of CT State Faculty Senate.
Thank you. Regents, Chancellor Chang, President Meduco. My name is Elle Vandermark, and I am President of Connecticut State Community College, Senate President. You were sold a plan for what a consolidated state community college could do within a specific cost savings plan as early as 2015. That plan and promises alongside each new leader never materialized. When you know numbers better than anyone else, you can shape them to respond to absurd promises, and we know now much of that was occurring over the last decade. You now know most of those cost savings were not only unreasonable, they were misleading and perhaps even a sham. The architects of that vision are long gone, but the consolidated community college must now be supported. Chancellor Chang spoke of changes, but the community college needs additional changes in a funding formula. We need stability. Connecticut State Community College, under President Meduco's leadership, is taking shape. However, we need you to seriously consider the concerns of the people you hear today. We need you to bring your expertise and experience to these decisions, and establish a funding formula for the community college. Legislators are watching what you do with the additional funding. Faculty and staff who advocated for the additional funding are watching. But most importantly, our students are watching to see what you do with the proposed budget. If you make the same decision today that you thought you would make walking into the room, have you heard the people today? Are you willing to change your mind in light of what Connecticut State Community College needs based on what you're hearing from its leaders, from its students? Not the architects who had a vision, not the people who stepped in the interim, but from the people who are making this college work. The Budget and Finance Committee of Connecticut State Community College Senate made a recommendation to the Senate, which I shared with CT State leadership, and I am now sharing with you, asking for a funding formula. That is a novel thing in Connecticut, but the overwhelming majority of states recognize reliable budget and funding formulas are a key component to stability. Today, I'm asking you to consider your expertise, your experience, and the advocacy here today, and make a slightly different decision. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next presenter is John O'Connor, faculty member here at Central.
Hello, everyone. Pam, I didn't get a confirmation email, so I didn't think I was going to do it. But I most certainly have a few things to say. First off, welcome to Central, everyone. In some ways, I think one could say how inclusionary Central is the fact that you all have been invited here. It is an element to that. I would also say that I hope you all come back when students are around, because it's all about the students. I just like to say, I guess, a couple things just quickly off the cuff. One, I would like to say welcome to the new chairperson of the board. And I can say that the union's read with some interest about the interview that was done in the Mirror, and your optimism about the future. And I would just sort of say, from the union perspective, we are less optimistic. And in some ways, some of the things that you talked about in that interview is a little concerning to us. There is far too much discussion by this board about workforce development, right? We are here to educate students. That is what we're about. Everyone wants a job. Everyone in this room wants a job, right? That there's no surprises, there's no interest around that, right? There should be more discussion about Shakespeare and less about the workforce. I would also say one other thing is, in the new chairperson's interview, far too much discussion about the state, right? We should be talking about students, and we should be talking about the residents of this state, right? That is what matters, not what Lamont wants or the leadership of the different caucuses. And I would also just sort of say there's a lot of sort of self-congratulation in here about the board. And, you know, when we think about funding going forward, right, that $80 million, a lot of people worked hard to get that. I get it. A lot of people did. And I would just sort of say, you know, how much of that 80 million are going to the campuses? How much of that 80 million are going to the classroom? How much of that 80 million are going to students, right? That's what you're here, right, to really advocate for, right? Not a system, right? The classroom. And I would just sort of say, I think, you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, students first in this system. But when it comes to tuition relief, students can't wait, and they shouldn't wait. And I think, you know, during COVID, a lot of the institutions did a lot of interesting things to get resources to students. And you should do that right now, I would say. A final thing, when we think about the resources in this system and what we're going to sort of do about spending going forward, I think we have to think sort of long and hard about what we want this system to be and be about. And again, you know, I know CFO Blanchard thinks about economics a little bit differently than I do. But the biggest assets that this system has is what takes place in the classrooms in Danbury, Willimantic, New Britain, and New Haven. And you all should not forget about that. Okay? With that, I would just say welcome, new chair. Thank you, Chair Ryan, for your service. And yeah, next time, Pam, like, you killed me a little bit. I would have worn pants today. I'm sorry. But thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Manoj Misra, who is a faculty member at Western.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good morning. I'm Manoj Misra, an associate professor of sociology and president of WCSU AAUP. As many of you know, WCSU has recently been recognized as a Hispanic serving institution. This designation highlights our dedication to serving a diverse student body, including many students of color, first-generation students. They choose WCSU for its quality education and value, seeing it as their ladder to achieving their dream. WCSU plays a vital role in building our community and cannot be easily replaced. Despite this, we face a serious financial challenge due to years of administrative mismanagement. Any financial cuts will disproportionately impact our students of color, undermining the progress we have made in fostering an inclusive and supportive educational environment. The BOR must introspect why this issue wasn't detected and addressed sooner. Accountability starts at the top, and the BOR has failed to regularly monitor and hold WCSU management accountable. Meanwhile, our faculty and staff are relentlessly working to attract and retain students, striving to maintain the high standards of education despite these challenges. Regent Balducci's casual remarks about cutting WCSU funding at the Finance Committee meeting were not only irresponsible, but deeply troubling. With his long and distinguished career in public service, Regent Balducci understands that words carry weight. His comments have caused widespread anger, confusion, and mistrust within our community, hindering our ability to attract and retain students. I demand that the BOR be more careful with their statements in the future. WCSU is funded through taxpayer dollars, a responsibility we take very seriously. During the last legislative session, our faculty and students worked hard, intensely lobbying the legislature in addition to our teaching and research duties. Our dedicated efforts secured additional state funding. It is crucial to remember that the system office does not generate revenue and does not own these funds. The people of Connecticut expect their tax dollars to be spent in the classroom, directly benefiting students rather than supporting a bloated administrative structure. In conclusion, our priority must be our students, especially those who depend on us the most. The BOR must ensure that WCSU receives full funding, reflecting the wishes of the people of Connecticut. Faculty, staff, and students should not bear the burden of administrative mismanagement. The WCSU community is working hard to navigate these challenges, and the BOR should not impede this effort. We expect the BOR to be constructive and supportive of our mission of delivering the high-quality education our students deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Tricia Stewart, and she is a faculty member at Western. Tricia, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Supportive of our mission of delivering the high-quality education our students deserve. Thank you.
Hold on. Hold on, please. Okay. You ready with your 3 minutes?
I am.
Thank you. You may begin.
Hello, I wanted to speak today to the importance of Western Connecticut State University as an institution and raise with the Board of Regents that you have an obligation to the people in the western part of the state of Connecticut to provide higher education opportunities for community members who live there. Higher education is meant to be a social good that positively impacts individual lives, families, and whole communities. When this is no longer understood by the people who are in power, like many on the Board of Regents who have only attended private or flagship state institutions of higher education, it is the middle class, working class, and poverty class who suffer. Therefore, the Board of Regents must use their considerable influence, networks, and privilege to strengthen Western Connecticut State University by offering their full public support for this important institution of learning. Western Connecticut State University is a place that changes people's lives for the better. It has caring, knowledgeable, and highly credentialed faculty devoted to student success. Western also has smart, committed, engaged students who deserve to have investments in their futures. I would add that none of the students or faculty are to blame for the financial crisis at Western. That was the work of management and administration who were not appropriately attentive to the running of the university. It is not only the Western administration who failed the students, faculty, and staff. It is also system office administration and this esteemed body that were not providing appropriate oversight, visioning, and planning when the national trends made it clear that public higher education was under attack by neoliberals and state legislatures. It should be noted that this time of action should have been taking place long before the COVID-19 pandemic. A question my colleagues ask me is, when will everything that faculty have been doing be enough? Unfortunately, the Board of Regents seems to repeatedly suggest that nothing being done at Western Connecticut State University is ever enough. We at Western are part of a larger system that has a public responsibility to uphold higher education for the communities in this state. All communities, all students. These students are our future. When will you appropriately support their educational dreams and help them reach their potential? We at Western are waiting.
Thank you. Our next presenter, and I hope I pronounced his last name correctly, is Kofi Adamako Ayisi, who is at CT State Housatonic. Kofi, can you check your audio and your video, please? Kofi? There you are. Can you check your audio for me, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Do you have your 3 minutes?
Yes.
You may begin.
Thank you and good morning. As stated, my name is Kofi. I'm a professional staff member at CT State Housatonic. I work directly with our students. And I'm here to let you know that the decisions you make on spending will greatly impact the lives of the students that I work with and that we all say we are committed to serving. Our community colleges serve as a gateway to higher education for many, particularly for our Black and Brown students. These students, who make up the majority of our enrollment, are already facing systematic barriers to education. The current plan exacerbates these challenges by diminishing the very supports they rely on to succeed. These services include academic advising, mental health support, and tutoring resources that directly impact their ability to thrive academically and personally. When these supports are eroded, we undermine our mission and compromise our students' potential. The increase in tuition means that students are being essentially asked to pay more while receiving less. This is particularly burdensome for our most financially. The combination of reduced services and higher costs not only hinders access, but also forces many to reconsider their pursuit of higher ed altogether. We're effectively telling our students that their dreams are unaffordable. Our faculty vacancies and reliance on part-timers compound this issue. Without sufficient staff, our students cannot receive the quality education they deserve. The personal connections and academic mentorships provided by faculty are irreplaceable elements of the educational experience, and their absence leaves a void that no amount of tuition can fill. Furthermore, many of our students come from underserved communities where access to higher education is already a significant challenge. One of our largest campuses, Manchester, has no recruiter, as our first student actually stated, right? So who's going to go to nearby schools and encourage potential students to enroll? High schools are constantly calling their campus to send someone to talk to potential students, but there's no staff. How do we think this impacts access and enrollment? Our student life offices across our system, right, which are essential to student retention, right, have been reduced to mainly one staff. Right? This one staff is responsible for creating and executing events, overseeing student clubs, food pantries, wellness centers, and conducting student leadership and development. Tutoring, which is absolutely critical to student success, is cut across the board on our campuses. Cafeterias are closed or reduced, fitness areas are closed. How are we supposed to compete when the very services that attract and retain our students are being completely dismantled? Majority of our public college and university students stay in state after graduation. By investing in their education, we are investing in the future of our communities and our economy. Education is a fundamental right and a critical tool for social mobility. It is our responsibility to ensure that this tool remains within reach, especially for those who have been historically marginalized. Approving the current spending plan without addressing these critical issues sends a message that we are willing to sacrifice accessibility and equity for short-term financial stability. This is a trade-off we cannot afford to make. As you review the proposed spending plan put forth by the Finance Committee, I implore you to prioritize reversing the recent cuts to ensure wraparound services and support students' success and the continued increase in tuition that prices out some of our neediest students. In closing, I want to thank our staff, our faculty, and our students, right, who engaged in many hours of legislative town halls, phone banking, email campaigns, and a host of other efforts that led to us getting this $80 million plus an additional $20 million. They made the difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Michael Hinton. He is at CT State Tunxis.
Hello, and thank you for letting me speak. My name is Michael Hinton. I'm a faculty member at Tunxis. I'm also an example of how our public higher education system works if it's fully funded. I grew up in poverty, surrounded by violence and addiction. When I was a teenager, I was made a ward of the state of Connecticut and taken into the foster care system. Public higher education offered me a way out. I'm now a homeowner, a husband, a father, a college professor. None of this would have been possible if I had not had the opportunities that were afforded to me by attending Three Rivers Community College. But the opportunities afforded to me a generation ago no longer exist for my students today. Decades of budget cuts and tuition hikes jeopardize opportunities for students at our colleges and universities, undermining their access to essential services and courses. Research has shown that spending is intimately tied to students' ability to be successful in college. This may because of the tireless work of my fellow union members, students, and community members. We won over $80 million in emergency funding for our system, funding that would begin to restore critical services on our campuses, such as tutoring, recruitment, disability services, career services, cafeterias, fitness centers, course sections, and would even allow us to hire full-time faculty, which we desperately need. These are the actions we need to take to address the challenges we're currently experiencing, and which would make our schools more accessible and attractive to future students. Instead, the Chancellor is choosing to bank this funding. If you ask anyone on our campuses, we have been drastically cutting faculty and staff for well over a decade. This strategy is not working. We have staff doing 2 to 3 jobs simply to make our students succeed. It's unsustainable, it's ineffective, and continues to hurt our students. What we need is funding, revenue, and significant investments. If we don't make these investments, we will simply perpetuate more inequity for our students. Our state is flush in its rainy day fund. We have a healthy surplus, but the fiscal guardrails starve the core services that our community relies on the most. Please fund our services now and demand that the state start truly investing in our community colleges for future years. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Benice McKeewee. She is a student at CT State Capitol. Benice, can you check your audio and your video?
Yeah.
There you are. You may begin.
Good,
We can hear you. You may begin.
good morning, boss. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You may begin.
Good morning, Board of Regents, Chair Guire, and Board of Regent members. My name is Benice McKeewee. I'm a student at CT State. Okay. My name is Benice McKeewee. I am a student at CT State Cap.
Benice, are you having trouble with your audio?
And also a senator on Capital Student Government Association. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I am speaking today to ask all of you to utilize the emergency funding provided. Hello?
We're here. We can hear you.
Provided to CSCU on reversing tuition increases that are hurting myself and my fellow students. Tuition increases have a profoundly negative impact on us. As a student leader at Capital, it pains me to see financial barriers force students to drop out or not attend college. Education should be a pathway to opportunity, yet increasing tuition limits access, particularly for people of color who are disproportionately affected by the financial constraints tuition increases imposed on us. I also urge you to utilize the emergency funding provided to CSCU to restore budget cuts made this past year. Across CT State, we saw devastating budget cuts that led to reductions of services all over the state. One of the major areas was reductions in library hours. Libraries are essential at our colleges for academic exploration and growth. But also, sadly, some of our housing insecure students, the library has provided a safe place to stay and study until shelters open in the evening. Limiting access to these resources not only hinders learning, but also exacerbates educational and economic disparities. Equally troubling is the effect on our communal spaces, such as the cafeterias across the campuses that have been closed. College cafeterias are a place for social connections and a sense of belonging, vital components of a thriving college community. Budget cuts have deprived us of more than just meals. They have eroded the bonds that hold us together. At City State Capitol, we were fortunate to get cafeteria service after they were threatened due to budget cuts. Our fellow community college campuses are not as fortunate. We refuse to accept that every college campus does not provide this nourishing communal space for their student body. I joined hundreds of students over the spring to fight for emergency funding for CSCU and to fight for the educational services that I deserve. I testified at the Higher Education and Appropriations hearing and spoke to legislators about the importance of funding CSCU. I pleaded the call from Chancellor Cheng to speak out and advocate for the funding that myself and my fellow students at Capital deserve. We were successful in getting our legislators to provide emergency funding to CSCU. Emergency funding that they expected to go towards reversing the cost and tuition increase. Now we need you to implement a spending plan that does these things, uses the funding to restore desperately needed services and reverse the tuition increases that are hurting us and pricing us out of our education. Please do what is right. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Adelie Elizabeth. However, she is working right now, and Andre Freeman will read her statement into the record for us. Hold on, please. Andre, can you get your video on and your audio, please? Andre is going to read Adelie's statement as she is a Charter Oaks student. Andre, you ready?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Andre Freeman. I'm a faculty member at Charter Oak State College as well as Capital, CG State Capital. I'm reading a statement on behalf of Adelie Creek. Good morning, members of the Board of Regents. My name is Adelie Creek, and I am a new student at Charter Oak State College. Although I'm unable to join you today, I feel that it is important to share with you my concern for the inequitable treatment of our faculty and to advocate for their fair compensation. Charter Oak caters to students with diverse backgrounds, most non-traditional, some wrought with adversity and challenges, but one common thread runs through us. We are eager for a quality education that will change our lives for the better. With its generous academic forgiveness program, flexibility to accommodate busy schedules, and wonderful, my initial impression was that Charter Oak sounded too good to be true. Upon receiving access to my student account and seeing an op-ed front and center in my newsfeed written by Seth Freeman, Ruth McDonald, and Michael Starenko, reality struck. Underneath its ambitious and inspiring mission, Charter Oak conceals a profound wound inflicted upon its own faculty. In Finland, teaching is regarded as a prestigious profession, on par with doctors and lawyers. In this country, teachers are criminally undervalued, underpaid, and exploited. Teachers play an indispensable role in shaping minds of all ages, guiding us through growth, and providing essential education across all industries. I am sure each of you can recall a teacher who was impactful and special to you. None of us made it into this room without teachers. It is alarming that my teachers at Charter Oak will be among the lowest paid in the country. one must first put on their own oxygen mask before assisting others. How can we expect our teachers to effectively educate and support us if they themselves are unsupported? How can we expect our teachers to pour empty cups? Our teachers who have not received a raise in over a decade and are subject to an outdated pay model that sometimes places them below minimum wage have been struggling with basic cost of living, while administrators have bolstered their own paychecks. It is time for Charter Oak to rectify this imbalance by ensuring faculty receives the compensation and respect they deserve. As a student, I urge you to recognize that the faculty's working conditions are our learning conditions. Their well-being directly impacts our success. We deserve teachers who can dedicate their time and energy to us without the stress of financial insecurity. A greater percentage of the budget allocated towards faculty and instruction translates into better courses, more prized attention, and a richer academic experience for each of us. Investing in our teachers is a direct investment in us, the students. On behalf of myself and all students at Charter Oak, I respectfully ask the Board of Regents to honor the faculty's request for fair compensation. Thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing me to share this statement.
Thank you, Andre. Our next and final presenter is Frank Vallier. He is also from Charter Oak, a faculty member there. Frank?
Good morning, honorable members of the Board of Regents for the state of Connecticut. I am Frank Vallier, a senior faculty member at Charter State College for the past 12 years, teaching healthcare administration and health information management. I am also an active leader in our over 200 plus member 4C Teaching Faculty Union. I am here today to reiterate our urgent request for your support in completing a fair and equitable labor agreement between Charter Oak State College and the 4Cs Union representing Charter Oak State teaching faculty. The most critical issue that is facing our teaching faculty is that they have not received any compensation increases in 12 years. Yes, you heard that correctly. There has been no increases, no suggestion for increases, or any recommendation of increases in the past decade. During this time, we have seen staff and administrative employees receive approximately 35 to 40% in raises over this same decade. During this time, the cost of living has also increased about 32%, effectively reducing our salaries to 68% of the original value. The situation has left us feeling invisible and undervalued, despite our key role in educating adult working students. More alarming, some faculty teaching low enrollment courses are paid less than the state's minimum wage, potentially putting the state in violation of its own labor laws. We appreciate Board Chairman Martin Quay's recent statement about repairing relationships with higher education union. We believe the best way to achieve this is by agreeing to a fair contract now. The current compensation system, designed in 2012, is no longer viable for the future. As 4C union members, we commit to advocating for more state funding in the long term, but we need the board to demonstrate good faith in rectifying these long-standing inequities since 2012. Thank you for your time and consideration of this urgent matter.
Thank you. Madam Chair, that concludes public comment.
Thank you, everyone. Next on the agenda is the approval of minutes from our last meeting. I'd like to call for a motion to approve the minutes from the May 23rd board meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second? Are there any?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any changes or corrections? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Next, we have the approval of the consent agenda. I'd like to call for a motion to approve the consent agenda. There is a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Consent agenda is approved. We are now moving from the consent agenda to committee and academic reports. I'm going to first call on Committee Chair Ira Bloom. We welcome your report from the Academic and Student Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Academic and Student Affairs Committee met on June 7th. Present at the meeting, in addition to the committee chair, were Regents Juanita James and Richard Forth and Professor Kalina Sasenka. Also present was Board Chair Ryan. We thank the board for its approval of the consent items on the consent agenda. Madam Chair, before we move on to the presentation and vote on the general education transfer policy, I would like to point out a few items of interest regarding the new programs just approved on consent. First, the committee would like to acknowledge the extensive, collaborative, and thorough work the provosts, their deans, and the faculty have done in developing and recommending the new programs to the Board of Regents for approval. A common theme running through these programs is they are student-focused. Course modality from course modalities, meaning is the course presented in person, in a hybrid format, or remotely, to course preferences, to internships and practicums. These new programs are designed to attract students, build enrollment, and assist the students in completion of their degrees and certificates, and ultimately achieving the career and professional aspirations. For example, the important new climate change studies programs at Central will offer students both a BA and a BS track depending on the student's preferred focus. I'm going to return to those programs in a moment. Another theme we have been seeing regularly in our committee work is that the new programs are designed with Connecticut interests, partnerships, and workforce development in mind, as well as the development of civic understanding on the part of the students. This month, for example, an accelerated Bachelor of Nursing program at Central, as well as accelerated tracks in its BA and BS degrees in computer science, both leading to master's degrees, were just approved. At Eastern, a new computer science program, BA, has also been approved. Also at Eastern, a modification in its BA degree in Spanish, this is an interesting change, includes an internship or field experience and specific elective courses in Spanish related to professional fields. In addition, the two climate change studies programs at Central, noted earlier, address serious concerns affecting the future of Connecticut. A letter of support for these programs from DEEP leadership is now available. We have just received. This, as the material in the package will indicate, this program has had very strong support from DEEP. Also, finally, today, approved is a new cybersecurity minor at Western. I think this one theme through these programs is they all address serious workforce needs in the state, and this is a crucial part of what is happening here. Madam Chair, we have one item for board consideration: the General Education Transfer Credit Alignment Policy, of which notice was given at last month's meeting. As you may recall, the board adopted 4 key areas of focus in December of 2022, the Board of Regents. 1, student success. 2, innovation and economic growth. 3, affordability and sustainability. And 4, systemness. The Transfer Credit Alignment Policy addresses at least 3, if not all 4, of these goals, particularly student success, affordability, and systemness. It will greatly ease the path of students transferring from Connecticut State to our universities and Charter Oak College. It will encourage students to transfer within CSUs from Connecticut State to our universities. It is an anomaly that in some cases at the moment it is easier for a student to transfer to another Connecticut college to complete their degree after they have a community college degree than to complete it within our system. This policy will go a long way to correct that policy. Dr. Ainsley Diamond and Mr. Stephen Marcelinus are here to walk us through how the policy came to be, what it requires, and its impact on students. Before that, I want to make one personal comment about this policy. In a former incarnation, I was involved in the development, implementation, and later, as a departmental advisor, the application of a similar policy in a nearby state in a large public university. This is one of the more important steps we have taken as a board. It will enable students to smoothly move from Connecticut State to complete their degree without loss of credit, general ed components of their degrees, without loss of credit, without extra credit charges, etc. The students will be able to see for themselves the path they need to take to complete the degrees and the credit they will have for courses they've taken at CT State. It is a foundational step for the university. Dr. Diamond, thank you for working us through how we came here to.
Thank you, Regent Bloom. Thank you, President Toro and Central Connecticut University for hosting us today and making us feel most welcome. Regents, presidents, and colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to introduce the General Education Transfer Alignment Policy. Excuse me. Today, across this beautiful sea of carpet, I'm joined by Stephen Marcelinus, who is the Director of the Office of Transfer and Articulation. This policy was designed, developed, and reviewed with the purpose of protecting CT State students' time, money, and effort as they seek to vertically transfer to the Connecticut State Universities and to Charter Oak State College. In this presentation, we will explain why this policy is necessary, the representation of faculty and provosts involved in the development and the vetting process, and how this policy works. Of course, we will do all of this with an eye on the clock as well. The national data on transfer is damning. Most community college students never transfer to a 4-year school. Given these data, the goals are obvious. We need to guide more students to vertical transfer and retain more transfer students within our system. But please let me be blunt. Our competitors do this faster and better, and they are very happy to take our students. Let's look at our data. Breaking this down into actual numbers, we know that within this cohort that we studied, the 19,237 students transferred to a 4-year institution. 7,519 students transferred to a CSCU four-year institution, and 11,718 transferred outside of the CSCU system. If we had retained only 10% of the 11,718 students who transferred outside of our system, or just 1,171 students, we could have brought in $30.9 million in tuition and fees. Steve and my work is focused on improving transfer and supporting our students' success, but the fiscal reality of hemorrhaging our students should not be overlooked. I'm going to pass this over to Steve, who's going to walk us through the policy.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to address the board regarding this policy. First, I want to start off by saying what it is that we are trying to do, because sometimes we get caught up very much in what this thing doesn't do versus what the actual goal is. And as Dr. Diamond said, we are really focusing in on vertical transfer, having our students consider our four-year institutions as the viable options that they are to complete their baccalaureate degrees and enter the workforce and be successful. This policy will not help with parking. This policy will not speed up the Wi-Fi on campus. We have to be clear. But what will it do? It will reduce the risk and it will reduce the confusion that it takes to navigate the gen ed requirements at specific institutions based on specific requirements for their programs. It will ensure that gen ed at CT State will transfer as gen ed at our four-year institutions. And it will simplify the academic planning process, which will then help our faculty and staff that are also guiding our students to that end goal of completing a baccalaureate degree. Next slide. I would like you all to consider this. Consider the task that we put our faculty and staff at CT State at on a daily basis. The idea that a student newly acclimated to CT State will walk into their office and say, I know I want to transfer, but I'm not exactly sure what it is I want to do. This is not that uncommon. It happens at our four-year institutions as well. As an advisor, they are forced with the task to try to advise them to create a full-time schedule, 4 to 5 classes within the next 30 minutes that will hopefully satisfy those requirements and be applicable to transfer. It is an overwhelming task and something that can change at a heartbeat if the student changes their mind as far as what they want to do or where they want to go. Next slide, please. This is all based off of our current practices. Our current practices are essentially based off of 2 options for transfer. You can enroll in what we call a transfer ticket, our degree pathways that work for transfer within our system, but that you have to lock in very early as a freshman at CT State within your first semester and hope that you don't change your mind. You will then receive, if you complete the associate degree, a block transfer that will relate to gen ed at the four-year institutions, or the other option, which most students are faced with and most faculty and staff are faced with guiding students towards, is the idea of navigating the course-for-course articulation, researching how a course articulates and transfers to another institution, and if that is applicable to the next for their program. We have 30 minutes with a student. It should not be wasted on trying to navigate transfer policy. We should be talking about, why are you here in the first place? Let's talk about how are you going to finance your degree. Let's talk about the options at our four-year institutions within the system to help you be successful. That time is devoted towards, again, trying to navigate these rough waters of if your class will count or not, and if you change your mind, did we just waste your time? Next slide, please. The crux of this policy is very straightforward. We are taking the general education requirements at CT State, we are looking at each category, and we're trying to align the categories based on their student learning outcomes to the categories at the four-year institutions. This is a very feasible way. It is not reinventing the wheel. We are working with what we have to try to just apply a little bit more flexibility to say, if you're looking for a history requirement, guess what? So are we. Let's not split hairs at this specific course. Let's make sure that that class is meeting the outcomes so you could be successful moving forward within your program to complete a bachelor's degree. This is just one example of the Framework 30, the gen ed requirements at CT State, and how they would be related to what Southern Connecticut State University requires for their liberal education program. Next slide. So how did we get there? This all started a long time ago, believe it or not. We started by creating, it started as a concept, but we know a concept from one person in a single office at the system office could only go so far. We needed to have a conversation to see if this was really feasible. So we charged a task force in spring of 2022 to start thinking about how could we make transfer of general education more seamless and easier to discuss with our students and for our faculty and staff. I would like to take a moment to thank some of the leadership that was involved with this task force, because this was a group of volunteers from across the system. It was faculty and staff that are passionate and advocate for transfer student success. Transfer is not in their titles. This is something they do because they know it's the right thing to do. Two of the main transfer champions for this task force were Dr. Braxton Kerrigan from Southern Connecticut State University and Dr. Sarah Selk from CT State, Three Rivers. They are dedicated to their tasks. They know their general education requirements inside and out. They have been involved with transfer for years, and their conversation, their leadership was vital to the creation of the recommendation. And I want to be clear that in this task force, that was the goal. It was to create a recommendation. Let's talk about this concept. Let's kick it around a little bit. Let's see what we could do that can actually work. The task force was very successful in creating that recommendation. They voted it out to move it up to the CSCU provost in March of 2023. We then moved that forward to try to look at the campuses for their feedback and for their review. The initial campus feedback, I will be honest, we fumbled. We kind of messed up because we were looking for speed and we were looking for a deliverable. We wanted to get this across the finish line to you all to make this work. We learned very quickly that that is not the way to go. But a side result of that was we came up with this other process to say, you know what, when we have these recommendations, let's get it in front of a group of subject matter experts on the institutions. Because sometimes going out to the entire campus is just not feasible. We need the folks that really work with this to look at it, give us some viable feedback, so we then can draft a policy. And that's what we ended up doing. I'm going to pass it back over to Ainsley to finish the rest.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. After the first round of feedback, we started this process all over again. Next, we took this a step further, and we presented this policy twice to the ASA committee, once as an informational item, and then it was successfully voted upon to bring to you today. This exhaustive process is what sets this policy apart from others. We knew that transparency and the opportunity for multiple feedback loops was necessary to ensure a responsive process. We've also made all of the documentation and feedback from the campuses available on our website to ensure the continuation of this transparency of process. So let's go back to the beginning here. Let me put these all forward. With this policy, when this student comes to you and asks for assistance, this policy will allow students time to explore majors with minimal risk of losing credit. It will simplify academic planning, and it will shift the conversation from navigating general education requirements to student success. In closing, I want to say that 10 years ago, I worked for the Connecticut Board of Regents. At that time, we identified that ineffective transfer was a barrier to student success. That was 10 years ago. When I rejoined the system a year ago, I was thrilled to see the work that Steve in the Office of Transfer and Articulation had accomplished, and this administration's determination to protect the credit completion of our CT State students. This policy will have a lasting effect on our students and for future policy action. Thank you for your time and consideration of this policy.
Thank you, Dr. Diamond. I would like to add that the policy comes to the full board with the enthusiastic recommendation of the board's Committee on Academic and Student Affairs. If there are any questions regarding this policy? If not, I will turn it over to...
Chair Bloom, Brendan Cunningham has his hand up.
I'm sorry?
Brendan Cunningham.
Oh,
Professor Cunningham.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Thank you. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that someone has given this program an apt acronym, GET CAP. In a younger vernacular, I think many of our students know what that means. Let's get no cap. I'd like to begin with two quotes, one from Ralph Waldo Emerson. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines. Next, I'd like to quote from Connecticut state law. The Board of Regents for Higher Education will develop and implement not later than December 1st, 2011, a plan for maintaining the distinct missions of the Connecticut State University system, the Regional Community Technical College System, and Charter Oak State College, and report on such plan to the joint standing committees of the General Assembly, having cognizance of matters relating to higher education and appropriations in accordance with the provisions of Section 11-4A not later than January 1st, 2012, and annually thereafter. This law is meant to avoid the foolish consistency Emerson warns us about. More than 6 months ago, the chair of this board, the Board of Regents, provided a signed letter promising that the system office would report on whether CSCU management is out of compliance with the state law I just read. There has been no subsequent follow-up showing that management and the board have a plan to maintain distinct missions and report on that plan annually to the General Assembly, and I have asked for a follow-up multiple times. All we can conclude is that CSCU is out of compliance with state law. What does it say to bargaining units and students that following state law is optional? Is following state law optional for everyone in our communities or only management? What does it say that a transfer policy, which runs roughshod over the unique missions of our campuses, is currently under consideration? I think management and the board have opened a Pandora's box by flaunting state law in letter and in spirit. I think coming semesters will show the consequences. I urge you to continue working on the transfer policy until it gets to the point where there is statewide agreement on that policy. I will report to the board that my colleagues at Eastern are not ready to approve this policy. I have direct messages to that effect, and I've been asked to deliver that message to you. We need to show respect for the unique missions of our campuses and avoid foolish consistency. This would at least show a modicum of interest in following state law. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the regents? Madam Chair, we see no other questions or comments from the regents.
Madam Chair, I think we can come to a vote on the policy.
Thank you. Is there a motion to go do?
I'm sorry?
Is there a motion on the floor, or are you going to create a motion?
I'm ready to move.
Okay.
I'm ready to move the policy for approval.
Is there a second?
And I'll second that. Rick Porter.
Rick.
Madam Chair, we have a motion and we have a second.
Is there any discussion? Any further discussion, I should say?
No other comments or questions from the board.
we can come to an immediate vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? The vote carries, the motion carries. Thank you, Regent Bloom, and your colleagues who presented that material. Thank you.
If I may, I want to thank the Regents for the support and for, I think, as I said before, this is a foundational policy that will make an enormous difference for our students. And my own experience is there were a few, in my former life, there were a few rocky spots at the beginning. Looking back a year or two from now, people will appreciate this more, from all segments will appreciate what this policy does. And I thank the board for its approval.
Well, thank you, Regent Bloom. We really appreciate your efforts and those of your colleagues. Moving on, the Audit Committee Chair, Lise Wright, I believe you have no report this month, or you do have a report. Oh, please go forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Audit Committee met on May 29th of this year. Management provided an update on the auditors of public accounts who issued the statewide federal single audit on March 27th, 2024. This type of audit reviews and tests compliance with federal award requirements across all state agencies. There were 8 findings related to the Connecticut State College and University system, and corrective actions were put in place to address the findings. Management provided an update on the statutorily required agency audits, which are also conducted by the auditors of public accounts. One report was issued since our last meeting, which was for Charter Oak for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. There were 5 findings in total, and corrective action is in place. Management explained that due to state statutes, the CSCU 2020 construction expenditure audit must rotate auditors every 5 years. Since Cohn-Resnick concluded their 5th year, management put out a bid for proposals using the statewide DAS contract. Whittlesey PC was selected as the successor auditor. The auditors from Whittlesey then presented the planning procedures and timeline for the CSCU 2020 construction audit. Auditors Grant Thornton then presented the planning procedures and required communications for the Connecticut Community Colleges, Connecticut State Universities, and Charter Oak State College audits for the year ended June 30th, 2024. No other matters were discussed.
Thank you, Chair Wright. Any other further comments?
No.
Any from the board? Thank you. Oh, sorry. Do you want me to repeat that?
Yeah.
Yes. I asked if there were any, I thanked Regent Wright, and I asked if there were any other comments or questions from the board. If none, we'll move on. Thank you very much. I'm now going to move on to the Finance and Infrastructure Committee with Richard Balducci as chair. I believe you have an item for board consideration from the Finance and Infrastructure Committee concerning CSCU's fiscal year 25 spending plan.
Thank you, I don't know if you can hear. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do have an item. The Board of Finance, our Finance Committee met on June 12th of this year, of this month, excuse me, and it's probably the most important meeting we have all year long because it sets the budget for the system office, the universities, and Connecticut State. And before I turn it back over to Dr. Blanchard, I would like to thank Lloyd and Melantina and their team for putting this together, the time they spent. I'd like to thank the committee members on finance, and I'd particularly also like to extend a thank you to the members of this board. You know, I'm probably the senior member on this board. I've been here probably years, and I've served on many boards, many of these boards, and there have been highs and lows, but I will say this, and I mean this. This board, this one that sits here today, is the finest board I've had the opportunity to be on, bar none, and they are here to work. I think they do an outstanding job. Everybody is interested in the most important issue, students, faculty, staff, and programs as they follow. So with that, I will say that we had a long discussion with Dr. Blanchard over on the 12th. We had lots of questions, lots of important issues. We made an adjustment to the resolution that we are going to move forward today, which I think is for the better. It strengthens us, I believe, as a board. And with that, I would say thank you again to all. And I will now turn it over to you, Lloyd, for your presentation to the members of this board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, Regents. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the work that you have been doing with me and my staff on putting together the work that we did for FY24 as well as for the FY25 budget. I'd also like to thank the persistent advocacy of our students, our faculty, and our union partners, as well as the personal advocacy of you, Mr. Chairman, and Chancellor Chang. This has been a difficult time for us over the last couple of years. I think we're all sort of supporting our students in the best way that we can, but because of some of the economics that we face, some of the headwinds that we face with regard to declining enrollments, it makes resource allocation decisions very, very tough. And finally, I'd like to thank the General Assembly and the Governor for providing, through Public Law 2481, $100 million in authorized spending for CSCU. That $100 million includes $80 million for deficit support, wage increases, and PACT expansion, and $20 million that the Chancellor mentioned in December, should there be additional ARPA funds available for tuition relief. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and provide some details on where we have been as a context for FY25 spending plan. Next slide, please. Oh, I control the slides, don't I? Thank you. So if you recall, at the beginning of FY24, the current fiscal year, which will end in about 5 days, we faced $146 million deficit in FY25. In response to that large deficit, the board called for a mitigation plan that would address that large shortfall. So in November, we delivered to the Board of Regents a mitigation plan that amounted to $100 million. However, the deficit was so large that a $100 million deficit mitigation was not enough. Therefore, we asked the state for $48 million to close the remaining deficits across the system, and we knew that the reopener was imminent, and we also asked for $33 million to pay for the CBAC raises and raises for non-represented employees. That 48 plus 33 equals $81 million. We are very pleased that we got 80 of that $81 million. If you look at one of the challenges we faced in dealing with the CBAC raises is that by the time the General Assembly passed the bill, we did not have a commitment from OPM on the increase in the block grant paid for by the RSA account, which is what is usually done each year by OPM. We only got last week a commitment from OPM to increase the block grant by 3.6%. And so that equals $14 million. What does that mean? That means of the $33 million in ARPA funds, 14 will be paid for by RSA, freeing up $14 million for, of the ARPA funds for our institutions. Many think that that frees up $14 million for other things, but it really frees up, 1.7 million of that will close the gap between the deficits, and I'll show you that slide in a couple of minutes, and 4 million of that will close the gap between what that $14 million pays for in terms of our what would be called block grant employees. That $33 million normally would have included 18 for block grant employees and 15 for non-block grant employees and non-represented employees. That $18 million only came in at $14 million. So we have to use $4 million of that freed up ARPA funds to cover the difference between the wage increases. So this provides, so in all, the $80 million paid for $41.5 million in deficits, 32.8, which is almost 33, in CBAC, and 5.7 in PAC. Section 7 of Public Law 2481 provides for $20 million, and we have committed to, the Chancellor and members of the board have committed to providing that $20 million for tuition relief for our students across the system. There are some provisions in Section 7 that makes it contingent upon determination by OPM, but we are encouraged that OPM will do the right thing for our students so that we can provide tuition relief.
Before you move online, would you, for the membership of this board, would you just go over the $4 million and the $15 million, the difference in the block grant employees for them to understand?
Sure.
And the non-block grant?
Sure.
And the change?
Typically, when CBAC increases are passed into law, the state has paid, as regards to higher education institutions here in Connecticut, the state has agreed to pay for those raises for block grant employees. In other words, let me back up. The state pays for essentially half of our employees through the block grant, and we pay for the other half of our employees through our tuition and other revenues. So when CBAC and the state approves a CBAC increase of this past year, 5% or so, about $18 million, that total cost would have been $33 million. 18 for the block grant employees, 15 for the non-block grant employees and unrepresented employees. Because they only provided $14 million in RSA, I've got to take $4 million out of the savings, right? The $14 million in ARPA savings from the $14 million in RSA. I've got to use 4 to cover that gap. And another 1.7 to cover the deficit gap that I'll show in a minute.
But who are the non-grant and the block grant employees, and who are the non-block grant employees?
There is no distinction other than a number of employees, a employee roster that we used to submit to the state that added up to the block grant employee number, right? So the point here is simply that the $80 billion is spoken for. It's spoken for closing deficits of $41.5 million, to pay for the increases for all of our employees across the system for $32.8 million. And the General Assembly agreed with us that PAC needed to be expanded, but they asked for us to pay for that expansion within the context of the $80 million. That amount is $5.7 million, so the 41.5, the 32.8, and the $5.7 million is what comprises the $80 million. And in Section 7 of the same law that provided the $80 million, there is $20 million available. And we have committed to providing tuition relief to our students using that $20 million, thanks to your advocacy, Mr. Chairman, Chancellor, and all of you, students, faculty, and our union partners. Next slide, please. So these next 3 slides will provide details on the state funding for CSCU and our institutions. The state has provided for FY25 close to $600 million. For that, we are deeply grateful for the state support for the work that we do for our students. That $596 million, however, is down $36 million from FY24. You will see on the slide, in the chart, you'll see that there are 4 columns. The first 2 columns represent the funds passed in the biennium, the FY24-25 biennium. And you'll see that the state provided $632 million in FY24 and $516 million in FY25. That represented a big drop for FY25 from 24, and that's what created the $146 million deficit that we then had to mitigate. We came back to the state with the request that I just described, and thankfully the state provided us with additional funds which represents the $80 million that we just mentioned. What I'm going to do now is drill into the additional support that the state provided. You'll see that number, the two numbers, $128 million and $27 million, that will add up to $156 million, which is the number you'll see on the next slide. This slide provides the temporary operating support that the state provided, both in the biennium budget and in the additional emergency support. This slide shows that that temporary support amounted to $156.3 million, which, however grateful we are for that additional support, it is $46 million less than the additional support we received in FY24, again, contributing to our deficit. So you'll see on the slide there are a lot of details, but let me walk through it column by column. And then you can look at the bottom row to see the total across the system. And you can look at the details as you are interested for each or any institution within the system. The first column shows context, the amount of additional support we received from the state in FY24. That amounted to $202.7 million. The next three columns represent the additional support that we got from the state for FY25. It came in three tranches. The first tranche says provide operational support through short-term recovery funds. So that's the ARPA funds that they provided. That equals $48.8 million. The state also added to that $48.8, $27.5 million that it provided from carry forward funds statewide. Those two columns comprise the additional support in the biennium. It's that third column that specifies the additional support just provided in the recent law of the $80 million. And you'll see how that $80 million is allocated to each of our institutions for deficit support, for CBAC increases, and for CT State Community College for the PAC expansion. So those three columns add up to the total number of additional support in FY25, and then the last column, the variance column, you can see how that FY25 amount differed from the FY24 amount. Every institution basically faced a decrease in additional support, but the institutions that needed the most help, they had a disproportionate increase in their support, and that included Western and CT State. So what I will do now is drill into the $80 million. And this slide shows how the $80 million, what the $80 million pays for. As I mentioned, deficit support, CBAC increases, and PAC funding. You see those numbers on the screen now. If you add it up, that 43.2, 32.8, and 5.7, it will be slightly over $80 million, about $1.7 million over. And that's what, that 1.7 will be covered by the savings created by the RSA and the increase in the block grant. At this point, I'd like to ask for questions from the regents about anything I've said so far. So, with the state support that we've been provided by the state, these are our projected results for FY25, and you will see how it compares to how we started FY24 and how we will end FY24. You'll see that FY24 includes a budget, which is the budget that we established at the beginning of the year, a budget that was approved by the Board of Regents, which had a $13 million deficit across the system. Because that's just for FY24, FY25 was a much bigger deficit. The Board of Regents called for a deficit mitigation, and we delivered that deficit mitigation. So the FY24 estimate shows a post-mitigation amount, suggesting the work that we did through this current fiscal year, FY24, to reduce spending across the system, so that in FY25, we will be ready to take on another difficult year with the economic conditions that we face, but we are projecting a $6.1 million surplus for Central, a $2.2 million deficit for CT State. That adds up to $3.9 million surplus. Of course, all other institutions, we are projecting a balanced budget. Now, the CT State number is a bit of a technicality. That number will be covered easily by the RSA allocation to CT State. So with the RSA allocation, CT State will face a modest surplus. Now, I have not included the RSA amount in these numbers because we were only told last week, we were only confirmed last week by OPM that those dollars would be provided. Where have we, so where are we relative to where we have been? The last bar, the blue bar on the left-hand side of this screen, is the FY25 projection or the budget that we are proposing, $1.216 billion. So that's $1 billion, $216 million. You'll see that that's very consistent with where we have been over the past almost decade, despite the fact that every year we face inflation and every year, almost every year, we face salary increases. Despite those salary increases, despite inflation, we've been managing to hold our spending constant with the exception of that spike in FY23. The FY23 spike had a lot to do with the fact that FY22 and FY23 raises were provided in one year, FY23. Each of those raises included lump sum components. For FY22, the lump sum component was $2,500 for each employee across the system. For FY23, that lump sum component was $1,000 for each employee across the system, on top of 4.5% raises. So that spike also includes an anomaly in the calendar called the 27th payroll. About every decade or so, there's an extra payroll. And that's when I say, woohoo, everybody likes a little extra money. But in FY23, there were 27 payrolls instead of 26, as there are most years. And so this spike can be explained by the fact that FY22 and FY23 raises were paid in one year, and the 27th payroll were paid in that year. So if you take out that spike before those anomalous reasons, CSCU is managing its resources as well as it knows how, while still serving our students as well as we know how. By maintaining flat spending across the state, despite the fact that inflation increases our costs every year, and salary raises, increases our costs every year. The right-hand side of this slide shows the volatility of the funding that we receive and the spending that we engage in. One of the challenges we faced, and I think it was raised by one of our commenters this morning, and I appreciate you raising it. The volatility of our support has been difficult to manage across the years. You'll see a decade's worth of history that shows modest increases, and then in 3 cases, large increases. You'll see last year, FY24, this year, but we faced a very large decrease following the very large increase in FY23. So all in all, we are managing our budgets as well as we know how, maintaining a flat spending posture for over a decade, despite the fact that inflation increases every year, and that inflation increase by greater rates during and after the pandemic, and CBAC increases and other wage increases, mostly in most years. So, Mr. Chairman, Regents, this slide here summarizes our proposed FY25 spending plan. That spending plan the spending plan, as I said earlier, $1.2 billion. That $1.2 billion is basically 1% greater than where we were at the beginning of FY24, despite all of the increases I just mentioned. How did we do that? Well, we did that by mitigating a large amount of resources in the current fiscal year, FY24. That shows the difference between our budgeted amount in FY24 of $1,205 million and our estimated amount at the end of the year, which amounts to $1,164 million. That is a decrease of about $50 million. And so the increase is similar, but most of that $52 million increase is $33 million in salary increases, probably about $17 million in inflation, and other discretionary choices made by institutions across our system. You'll see state aid increases by about 3%, $11.8 million. Additional operating support, I've already shown you, has decreased by about $52 million from the FY24 estimate. And our operating revenue, this is the revenue we receive from tuition, fees, and room and board, to the extent that we have room and board revenues. Those have increased at the rate of the tuition increase, which is 5%. That was passed earlier in 24. In terms of expenditures, you'll see those increases in expenditures, $50 million in salary expenses. I've already explained much of that is CBAC and other raises. Fringe benefit increases, this $15.9 million is the impact of the fringe methodology change implemented by OPM. I'll explain more of that in just a little bit. What OPM did essentially was hear our cries about the vastly increasing fringe costs, so they removed a large amount of fringe costs from our responsibility. For that, we are grateful. However, they also removed more revenue than they removed costs. That's what created additional costs on our part of about $16 million. And then finally, small increases in financial aid. Of course, financial aid increases automatically when we raise tuition because state law requires that 15% of our tuition is dedicated to student financial aid. Some of our institutions go beyond that amount. And finally, other expenses, utilities, debt service have increased only modestly, but not more than traditional inflation amounts. So with the next few slides, I will walk through each institutional budget to the extent that you have questions. In fact, let me back up. Let me back up to, is this the back slide? Let me back up here and ask for Regent's questions on the overall spending plan before we get to each institutional budget. Marty Guay.
CFO Blanchard, the $14 million from RSA that we're getting?
Yes.
Where does that fit into the stack, that $80 million?
So the $14 million will be added to the block grant. It is not within the $80 million, it is on top of the $80 million. We learned of it late. So what the impact of that $14 million on top of the 80 that will be added to the block grant will be to free up $14 million of ARPA funds within the 80. And that $14 million that will be freed up from within the 80 will be used to cover gaps in deficits and gaps in the CBAC raises because we were asked to pay for the PAC funding within the 80.
Okay. Got it.
Other questions? All right. So, oh, I'm sorry. I see someone's hand. Professor Sasanka?
Yes, thank you. I apologize for my voice. Hopefully you can understand me. I have a few questions, but just I think initially I do have questions about that 14 million also, just in terms of, when we might have some discussion about this money that we advocated for with a very specific narrative, right? We were focused on rolling back the tuition increase, given the number of cuts that we've given, that we've had. As I believe Natalie Nicholson said, we're asking students to pay more for less, certainly at CT State. So, some discussion of how that 14 million plus the 8 million left over from the 13.5 in ARPA funds that were set aside before might be used to either to make sure that students actually see the effects of this additional funding beyond the 14.7 million, the 47 million that we knew that this system office was publicly advocating for, at least. I think there was an expectation that we would see that on the ground at the institutions that really needed it. So if we could just initially, that's the first question I have. When will we have a chance to discuss how that is best used? That 8 million that was left over, 13.5, is partially there because many of our unions chose not to opt in to the retirement incentive plan, which would have gone to people at the ends of their careers who had the benefit, perhaps, of strong public education systems, et cetera. We would love for that money to go towards upcoming generation that is increasingly not seeing those opportunities. So, yeah, when will we discuss that?
Thank you for your question and comment, Professor Sasanker. We have been discussing this with you for a few weeks now. We can continue that discussion. I don't know exactly what time, but I'm sure the Chancellor and others in System Office and our presidents are eager to talk with you about how to best support our students with these funds. But the $80 million is spoken for through the deficits, through the CBAC increases, and through the PACT funding. And it's because the PACT funding was paid within the 80 that we had some shortfalls that had to be covered by the freed up $14 million. There will still be freed up funds, but the $20 million provided in Section 7 of the bill is precisely what we will use for tuition relief. And we will continue to have conversations about the nature of that relief. And so, thank you for your question. Professor Cunningham.
Thank you. Professor Sasanker largely asked the questions that I was planning to ask, and I want to thank Dr. Blanchard for his indication that we still have on the table some tuition and financial relief for our students. I think it's time we put our money where our mouths are in terms of avoiding raising barriers, financial barriers for our students. And I just would like to acknowledge the fact that at least among AAUP members, I think regents as well as system office leadership are in receipt of something like 375 messages indicating strong support among our community for tuition relief with students. I don't know how many of those messages you received from our colleagues at CT State, but I think it's very important we acknowledge their voices. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Can we get back? Are there other questions by the regents?
If there are no other hands, I do have another question.
Okay, Professor Sasanker.
Well, actually, I think a question and then a comment that you might want to verify if I'm right. So the question concerns the reduction of sort of system office staff / shared services. I think when I asked about this at the finance meeting, I was told that of the 30 total who were actually positions that were cut, because some of them were transferred to CT State, of the ones that were actually cut, 24 were managers. But, reflecting on that seems surprising. And I was wondering, is that because were these people in human resources and therefore designated as managers? Because if so, we've recently been in receipt of a pretty devastating report about the state of human resources at CT State. So what that represents is an enormous cut in a place that we are already struggling severely. So is that correct? Is that a reduction in human resources, or is that something else? I just want to draw attention to the fact that that was a cut in the services to CT State, even though they were system office lines.
I appreciate the question, Professor. The 30 people that were, so there were 30 fewer people at system office and shared services than there were in the previous year. 13 of those people were transferred from our shared services unit to CT State. And we transferred the budget that supported those 13 people to CT State to support them. The remaining 17 personnel, or 18 or so, I think it's 31 persons, were reduced from both system office and shared service units. So through those actions, we saved $10 million from system office shared services expenditures, which is an action that Chairman Balducci, you asked us to make sure that we did, because we were asking our institutions to mitigate and cut budgets significantly. And it would have been a bad thing for our system office not to do the same. So we wanted to make sure that we engaged in deficit mitigation every bit as much as our institutions, who engaged in very successful deficit mitigation to get us where we are. But system office also reduced its share by $12 million. 6 of that was in the form of personnel, 6 of that was in the form of other expenses, mostly IT contracts.
Okay, but those personnel did serve CT State for the most part.
For the most part, you're correct. For the most part, you're correct.
So just one more comment, if you'll indulge me, including my terrible voice. I want to draw attention to the fact that our most significant challenges, so, we are acknowledging our success in keeping, our costs pretty consistent, which, as you know, I understand that that's the job. But I think that it would be much better if we were growing in certain ways, because in anchoring ourselves to 2019 levels of funding, we are anchoring ourselves to a historically low level of funding for our system in terms of the ratio of funding, students, et cetera. But I just want to draw attention to the fact that, as you say, I believe you have said that the cost historically, the general funded employees are covered by the RSA, which is the Salary Reserve Fund from the General Assembly. That's correct. Historically, that is covered in its entirety. The actual cost of those employees, the wage increase this year, is $18 million. They are giving us 14 after threatening to give us none for quite some time once they realized we got more ARPA funds than expected. That's alarming because it's a statement about how we are valued. I believe that perhaps comes from the direction of the Office of Policy and Management more than anywhere else, because the legislators absolutely advocated for us to get that money this year and expected it to go to students. But in addition, from I believe the same source, we have a fringe readjustment that punishes us on many levels, and again, shorts us in ways that we have not been historically. So we are being cut and cut in one way or the other. They advocated so strongly for this ARPA money. I am so grateful to legislative leadership for actually making sure that it happened for us this year. And I want to make note of the fact that there were so many other state agencies that really needed this money too, and they gave it to us, right? And yet we are seeing continued attacks coming from other places, making sure that our costs, that our block money, we keep getting cut into our block grant money, so that we, even if it looks like the same amount, it's not functioning the same for us. I am alarmed by that. I am disappointed by that. But I do think it's very important that we honor the intentions of the legislators, so that they, once again, they kept us alive to a budget year. They can fund us appropriately and make sure that we do the right thing when they do, because clearly we are we are facing some very serious challenges about the perception of where the system should go. And I'm going to say OPM again because I don't know any different. It seems to me that the suggestion is that we should be on the decline. And that's not right. I am at CT State, and I know that our students need resources desperately. So yeah, I just want to put that on the public record for whoever's ears it hits, because it is a serious challenge, a public challenge, and one that the general Connecticut public needs to be aware of. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment, Professor Sasanker, and we certainly also are grateful to the General Assembly for providing these additional funds, both the $80 million and the $20 million as per Section 7 of the law. Thank you so much. Get back to our presentation, please. So with that, I will move on to each of our institutional FY25 spending plans, starting with where we are now. And I will also thank President Toro for inviting us to her campus. This is a beautiful campus. I enjoy every time I come here, and I hope you are enjoying your time here as well. Central Connecticut State University proposes a $232 billion budget for FY25. With that, they are projecting a 6.1% surplus. Sorry, not 6.1%, a $6.1 million surplus. And you'll see the revenues comprise a $1 million increase, $1.4 million increase in state appropriations. Their share of the decrease in one-time funding, 7.1% in tuition and fees, and housing and food services costs, revenues rather, remaining relatively flat. So their expenditures will increase by about $11 million. Most of that comes in the form of the $6.5 million increase for CBAC and wage increases, and then you see the other increases in fringe costs, other expenditures, and debt service. Eastern Connecticut State University is proposing a $125 million spending plan, and they project a balanced budget for FY25. In terms of their revenues, they expect a small $1.2 million decrease in revenues and a small $4.3 million increase in expenditures, largely explained by a $3.1 million increase in personnel costs. That equals a 5% increase, which is just about equal to the CBAC and other wage increases. However, they will produce a balanced budget for FY25. Southern Connecticut State University proposes a spending plan of $232 million, and Southern also projects a balanced budget for FY25. Their revenues essentially are held flat, while their expenditures are expected to increase by about $15 million. Now, recognize that's $15 million from the FY24 estimate, but it'll be a little bit more from the beginning of the year. But most of those increases in expenditures you'll see are in personnel costs. $7.5 million in personnel costs. That represents a little more than the wage increases. Their share of the fringe benefit cost impact, other expenses, which includes for Southern an extra investment in financial aid, which we certainly appreciate as a part of their strategy to improve their enrollment picture. But in all, they project a balanced budget for FY25. Western Connecticut State University proposes a spending plan of $126.5 million. And Western is also projecting a balanced budget for FY25. Western received a fair amount of support from System Office to help them through their FY24 and FY25 budgets, and that is one of the bases on which we are able to project a balanced budget. $6.3 million of which came from the state. That's a part of the $80 million we were given, and we are certainly grateful for those funds. You'll see their revenues are up by $7.7 million. Most of those will come in the form of their housing and food services and their tuition and fees. One-time funding increases are unique for Western for reasons I explained in terms of the additional support provided by System Office. Their expenditures are increasing modestly by 6%. Most of that is explained by the CBAC increases and other wage increases and inflation that impacts spending on other other expenditures. Connecticut State Community College proposes a spending plan of $420 million, and Connecticut State also projects a balanced budget for FY25. You'll see that their $442 million revenues is about $6.4 million greater than it was in FY24, most of that on the back of greater increased state appropriations that even offset the decreases in one-time funding they receive, as well as modest increases in tuition and fees. CT State's expenditures will increase by about $40 million from the post-mitigation estimate in FY24 of $420 million. So of that $40 million increase, 29.5 of it is in personnel. Now, most of that increase are from costs that CT State cannot control. There are some costs that I'll ask President Maduco to explain, but most of that increase, the 29.5, is in CBAC increases. $8.6 million increase in fringe benefit costs is from the fringe benefit change, as well as the associated personnel costs, and then a modest 3% increase in other expenses, which certainly is below inflation for OE. President Maduco, if you don't mind, if you could share with us what's happening with your expenditures and help explain why this is going to be important for your students.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Blanchard. From an expenditure standpoint for CT State for the upcoming FY25 fiscal year, like our sister institutions, the majority of our expenditures are tied to personnel. So when you look at our personnel plan going into the new fiscal year, you will see 160 positions. Of the 160 positions, 140 of them were either vacancies, just through natural vacancies over the course of this past academic year, or positions that simply went unfilled due to it takes a while for us to hire positions at CT State. So of the 160, only 20 positions are actually brand new that we're adding to our FY25 expenditures. And those positions are primarily, one, bargain employees, but also two, investments that we're making in public safety. CT State Community College is one of the largest employers in the state of Connecticut. So not only 70,000 students, we're north of about 6,400 employees, and we're arguably we have the largest physical footprint of any public entity in the state, where we span across 22 locations, right? So to maintain our facilities, to secure our facilities, to provide services, to provide instruction, et cetera, it's a huge undertaking for the institution. But we believe we've been conservative. We believe that we've adhered to the budget mitigation plan. And then when you look at the 160 positions that we have for FY25, 84% of those positions are bargained. So for example, we have about 20 maintainers. 20 positions are tied to maintenance, right? Again, we have to maintain our physical footprint. 9 positions are tied to IT. We have 12 positions tied to public safety, right? We have to maintain our facilities, keep them safe. We have 7 child care centers. We have expensive equipment across the entire state of Connecticut. So when you break down the actual position lines, it's primarily to really maintain our operations. We have 20, I believe we have 20 faculty lines, right? 5 of which are nursing, because we're expanding nursing, right? So when you really look, the devil's in the details. When you look into the details of our expenditures, it is modest, and it's typically due to just a natural attrition that you have with the large organizations as of CT State. So that's just really the explanation of what's going on, but I will be remiss, we were able to eliminate our $33.6 million deficit for FY24, right? We were able to eliminate the out years of our deficit and slash it from from anywhere from $40 to $50 million year over year, right? So we've definitely taken the brunt of budget mitigation, right? We've been, we've been stringent with our decision making, and again, we get an earful from our students, from our faculty and staff in terms of the decisions that we make. So I want to make it clear that hopefully the perception is not that we're hiring like crazy. We're doing what is necessary to maintain the operations of a CT State.
Thank you, President Maduco. And finally, Charter Oak State College is proposing a spending plan of $22 million, which also projects for a balanced budget in FY25. You'll see the spending, their revenues increasing modestly by $1 million, and their expenditures increasing also modestly by about $3 million, still with an expected balanced budget. Regents, I'm happy to take any of your questions about any parts of the spending plan just presented. So as we proceed, I want to...
I just would make one quick comment.
Please.
About CT State and that $40 million, John, jumped out at everybody on the committee, and it was justified after we found out that there was a commitment that you had no choice on. That was something that it was in place. There was nothing you could do about it. You kind of explained it. Just do it again, just quickly in 2 or 3 sentences, because everybody looks, certainly at the committee, Lloyd was looking at CT State and that $40 million, where all the others were 3 and 4, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't have my notes from the Finance Committee meeting, but I believe it was $14 million was their share of the CBAC costs.
Right.
$4 million was an estimated amount of inflation that they would have to face in their OE expenses. And $8 million, I believe, was costs that they had to absorb from the Guided Pathways Advisors grant. So they used the grant to pay for Guided Pathway Advisors. The grant expired. To maintain those advisors, to help our students, we had to absorb those costs onto our operating budget. That amounts to 26 of the, 40. That amounts to 26 of the $29.5 million in the personnel cost line alone. Did that explain for you?
Yeah, it does. I just want to clarify it again, that you no control over those. That's the way it is.
No control over the vast majority of it. That's
right.
Correct. There are some discretionary decisions, as President Maduco mentioned, who is in the best position to understand what his students' needs. And so I've already shown this Charter Oak slide. The final slide from the spending plan shows the system office and shared services budget. As I mentioned earlier, we are reducing our spending by $12 million. $6 million of that, Mr. Chairman, comes in the form of reduced personnel, and $6 million of that comes in the form of lower other expenses. And so we are trying to do our part of managing our resources very well so that almost all of the money we receive goes to our institutions where our students take their classes. If there are no other questions from the regents, this completes my presentation of the spending plan. I have included more in this presentation that addresses an analysis of why our spending has grown. I don't want to go through this because of time, but you have it in your packet. And we covered this in the Finance Committee meeting last week. But I'll just show you this slide to conclude my remarks. This slide shows why spending has been increasing at CSU, why those in the state have shown concern over our spending. Just look at the top line. See how the number goes from excuse me, FY12 to FY23, where that orange spike is highest. That's what people have shown concern about as it relates to CSCU spending. I want to explain that spending increase. I've broken it down, I've decomposed it basically into its three main components. One, base salaries. Two, salary increases negotiated by CBAC and the associated non-represented increases. And three, fringe costs. So the base salaries are the gray area. The CBAC and other increases is the green area. And fringe costs is the orange. You see how fringe costs have increased extraordinarily over the past decade, such that OPM engaged in a policy to reduce it. That explains the reduction in the spike, so that the trajectory is more modest from FY12 to FY25. However, most of that increase, as you can see in the green area, comes from salary increases over which we have no control. The state negotiates CBAC increases, and we bear the cost of those increases together with the state. The state covers some of the costs, as I mentioned earlier, and we have to cover other parts of that cost, the non-block grant employees, sir. And so it is a misnomer that the increases in spending for this system and our institutions comes from mismanagement. The increases in spending from our institutions and in this system comes largely from the green and the orange bars that you see on the screen. If we took the total spending in FY12 and the total spending in every one of those years, including what we are proposing in FY25, we know what the fringe costs are, so we can back that out. We can subtract the fringe costs from that total spending. We also know what the amount of the raises were for each of those years. That represents the green. Once you take out the fringe and the raises, you'll see what's left is the gray bar. What does that mean? The gray bar is declining. That means we have to reduce our personnel count just to accommodate the costs associated with CBAC and other wage increases, the green area, and fringe costs, the orange area. We have to reduce our number of personnel just to absorb these costs that we do not control. So I hope that this presentation makes clear the financial situation that we're in. We manage our resources actually quite well here in our system. We manage our resources in spite of these extraordinary, uncontrollable costs that force us to cut, and cut. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Questions by members of the committee? Ted? Yes, Ted.
Hi, thank you, Chair Balducci. Just wanted to make a few points for people who may not have listened into the Finance Committee meeting. But first, let me say that I thank the people who spoke earlier for bringing up some very important points regarding proper fiscal management. And while I accept certainly what you just said, CFO Blanchard, and I think it's absolutely true that a lot of these costs are uncontrollable, that doesn't mean that we don't have control of costs. And we should be very vigilant to realize the savings that have been promised to people by prior people in this chair. And we should do that by reducing costs and wastes where that exists. In addition, a point was made regarding what happened in Western. And again, I think that was predicated mostly, correct me if I'm wrong, about unrealistic expectations about enrollment and the ability of this board in prior incarnations to enable that spending based from reserves when it was not justified and did not materialize. So it is the duty of this board in its fiduciary duty to be responsible, and that does mean making difficult decisions and not doling out monies where they may be needed immediately so that we can safeguard the health of our institutions over the long haul. In that regard, again, the fantastic work done by everybody around this table, in the legislature, in the seats here, unions, everybody, all of our partners, faculty, in getting the legislature to listen to us this time to what was important at, frankly, a detriment to other people who are also out there looking for more money. However, for us to assume that will continue to be successful, in my mind, is not viable. We need to be continually vigilant. And in that regard, the Finance Committee put through a change to the resolution that would impose different level of scrutiny and control so that the committee and this board does not make a one-year decision over a one-week period and say, okay, let's go, but instead factors in the reality that things are changing a lot on the ground, and we need to be constantly in touch with our institutions on the level of spending, on the level of enrollment that they are projecting, and whether that is actually happening or not, as that largely governs revenue, and that we have the controls necessary to take action as needed if that comes to pass. So a lot of this was covered in the Finance Committee meeting, so I hope just to provide that information here. And then finally to point out that we still have a large number of challenges, right? It is one thing, again, to congratulate us all for hard work. There is a lot more hard work to come because the overall headwinds against higher ed are obvious to everybody. And just this chart shows, right? The degree in which we are being considered valuable, it has been reduced. And so we must all continue to work both to try to change that perception of what our institutions stand for to get what we deserve, but also to be fiscally prudent in case that doesn't happen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Well said. And that resolution that we will be moving forward, hopefully, is the second to the last resolve there with that change. But I think, well, before I do it, other comments or questions?
My hand is up.
Trustee Stewart?
Oh, was there someone online?
I can go after you. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. Thank you. I just want to echo everything that Ted said. Thank you for summarizing that so eloquently. But also to echo what he said, the importance of the work that this committee has to do and this board has to do in terms of right-sizing the system so that we can afford what we have coming down the road. While we're figuring out and patchworking and piecemealing how to figure it out for this year and into next year, moving forward, as I'm sure Mr. Blanchard will agree, those problems are still going to be there, and they're only going to become exacerbated as time goes on if we don't make some substantial changes. We have all of these systems that are, I'll say, processes that are in place now to look at our system as a whole and see what type of changes need to be made. And I presume this is why Mr. Gui will be our new chair, as this is something that he's pretty good at in his professional career. But I do just want to say how it makes me reluctant to support the spending plan just because I know what's coming down, but I understand needing to support that this patchwork approach. What I'm really, really looking forward to and kind of anxiously awaiting is what we're going to do moving forward to make sure that we can pay our staff, pay our bills, make sure that our students are getting the best education possible, and really working to change the perception that we need to win this battle. And I think that that's something that we're all committed to. It's going to be difficult work. I think this is just, the first step in a large process that we're going to start undertaking. And I just want to thank everybody for their support in that. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention just thanking everyone who had emailed us over the last two weeks. Thank you for completely bombarding my inbox, but with good reason and good purpose. And I think it's just a reminder how many people are vested in the success of our system. And if it's a good reminder for us that a lot of people are paying attention to what we're doing, and it should be a reminder for us that The work will be long, hard, tough, and this is just a first step in a big piece of that, so thank you.
And I would agree with that, and I think that, doing the same thing over and over and getting the same results isn't where we're headed, and I think part of this, that resolution where we can make changes quarterly rather than having to wait and Band-Aid things as we've done in the past is at least a step in the right direction here, and I think that's where we're headed, and hopefully we'll continue. Other comments? I'm sorry, Dr. Sasenka?
Yes, thank you. Just to sort of follow up on the last two comments, I really appreciate the fact that there are going to be additional checkpoints in this budget over time. I think that's quite an improvement. But at the same time, I think it's very important that we not concede to the direction, the pessimistic sort of perception of where we're going. This will be my fifth year participating in these board meetings. I know how long we've been fighting this fight. I know how much of an investment the state has placed in a direction where we are transferring increasingly larger percentages of our cost onto students. For there to have been a shift in the position of the legislature this year is so significant. And I think we are at a moment where we are in a fight for the future of public education in Connecticut, and we have to seize that moment. So this ARPA funding this year has given us a few more months to really, really make the case. And part of the issue is that we have not been able to properly tell the truth about where we are. When we talk about, for example, the additional $8 million in cost that CT State has to absorb from hiring close to 200 people on temporary money, that was a decision that this board made. A different composition of this board, Chair Balducci, as you point out, right? A different composition of this board was a decision that was made because the design of the consolidation itself, as Professor Vandermark earlier in this meeting pointed out, was yet another in the list of things that I would say are coming in from the direction of, let's say, the governor's office, that increasingly attempt to transfer costs onto students and off of the state. So there's the fringe rate readjustment, and how it has affected us. There's the RSA, the holdback. But there's also the design of consolidation where the expectation was that we could simply convince students to take more credits and fund us through tuition dollars in that way. So I say that to say that there is so much about the design of CT State going forward that will have to be a readjustment to a perception of the future of higher education in this state, where the state is backing off and giving it to students. And that we need to have a long conversation over the next few months. And, this idea that we need to hold to the promises made by previous iterations of this board regarding the savings that we have promised, I want to say that that's absolutely the wrong way to go. What we need to demonstrate is that we made promises we could not keep, as evidenced by this, the $8 million this year for the GPAs. But that's not the full cost, and the full cost is coming right at us. And the students will feel that huge cut also, and we designed that for them, right? So we have to make it clear that as we revise this spending plan, as we discuss this over the next few months, that the promises made about those savings were made, they were ill-informed, but they were also malicious. If you think that we should not be moving in the direction of increasingly shifting costs onto students while reducing the things that we are providing them. And at CT State, we are feeling it the most because we were literally created as a structure to contain and sustain and create cuts within us. So I hope that is the conversation that we'll be having over the next few months with us, between ourselves, and with the legislature, because they are moving living. They are seeing it, they are feeling it. And I think we really need to make that case because we are finally, for the first time, in a position to win this for our students and for the future and for the state of Connecticut, for the residents of the state of Connecticut. And that's our job. That's our obligation, right? It's the future of the state of Connecticut. And I think this is really important for us to do. So, yeah.
Yes, Brendan. Brendan, did you?
I'm sorry, that was just the clapping hands emoji, not the raising hands emoji.
Okay. Just another comment, and I'm not sure if it's in the side or not, but we have to fix the articulation agreement also that moves students from the community colleges into our universities. I've had 3 calls in the last 2 weeks that they can't get help to move from from the community college, CT State, into Central, Southern, Eastern, or Western because of the difficulty that they are faced with. So that's something, if we're going to keep students in the state, and as Iris showed, the dollars we're losing is crazy. Those are what we need. We need tuition dollars, and the only places we get help are the state and tuition from the students. So that's another item we have to deal with. Any other comments by members of the board? Ira, yes.
Thank you. I just want to emphasize the point that the Chair Balducci just made. We have ways, we need to do things, and we are doing things like the transfer alignment policy that will increase the percent of students transferring from CT State to the universities compared to other systems is abysmal. I mean, it's the only way to describe it. We should be able to substantially increase the number of students, and this is as Chair Balducci said, this is a good way of increasing revenue. We also need to, and all the emphasis on cutting, which I understand, I've been in these situations in former lives, we need to keep our programs moving and up to date. The key programs that we have that attract students, like the computer science programs, like nursing programs, etc. These are expensive programs. These require faculty who are up to date and evolving. In the computer science field, which I'm somewhat familiar with, if I take a nap, something's happened. You can't, so, we have to make investments in certain places even as we're holding back in other places. And I just want to, otherwise we're not served. This system has a unique place in the state. We are the system that serves the people of the state, that provides the professional staff that's needed in the state. UConn has a different mission. And it doesn't serve the state in the same way that CSCU does. The independent colleges have their own issues, obviously. We need to solidify what we're doing and why we're doing it, and that may take some investment while we're cutting. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Before we move this, I ask to move adoption of this resolution. None? I think we have another amendment, but it would be technical, isn't it? The one that changes the resolve? Oh, I have the old version. Yeah. What else is new? Okay. Okay, then with that, I would move adoption of the resolution for the Connecticut Board of Regents spending plan for the colleges and universities.
Second.
Made and seconded.
Are all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? The fiscal year 25 spending plan is approved, and thank you all for the hours you put into creating this and sharing this information with all of us, and I do appreciate comments from all of you as well. Moving forward, committee shares are happening. There's no report from the Human Resource Committee. Thank you. And Regent Lang, the Technology Committee, has no report. No report. Thank you. We do have no report from the Executive Committee. And we have no business, therefore, to conduct an executive session. As I step down and retire from my role as board chair, I just want to express my heartfelt gratitude for the incredible journey. Oops.
One more time.
Do you want me to start again? Please. I think so. Please. Oh, dear. So the last business is my comments. As I step down and retire from the role as board chair, which I have to say has truly been one of the highlights of my life, I do want to express my heartfelt gratitude for this incredible journey that we have shared. And I have to say it's because of each and every one of you. You bring to the table wealth and information and knowledge that I have not seen anywhere in my, as we know, Rich, short years in this business world. But it has been really an honor to work alongside of such dedicated and talented individuals. Over the years, we have achieved remarkable milestones and navigated numerous challenges together. Your support and commitment have been invaluable, but I'm confident that the board will thrive under the new leadership of Marty, building on the strong foundation that we have established. And I want to personally thank Chancellor Chang, because I was on the search committee that selected him, and I do think we did a good job. So that was also one of the highlights. I met so many of you through those processes too. But I want to thank you for your trust, your collaboration, and your friendship. I look forward to seeing the continued growth and the accomplishments of this outstanding organization. So thank you so very much, and I applaud every single one of you. So thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would like to make a motion on behalf, to propose the board that we pass a formal resolution thanking Chair Ryan for her long and distinguished service to this board.
Is there a motion? Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? No, you don't need discussion. No debate. Therefore, we'll come to an immediate vote.
It needs a vote, yeah.
We need a vote if you're going to do this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. So, for my final order of business,
Excuse me, Madam Chair?
Yes?
In our acknowledgement of your contribution to the board, I have two official statements to read into the record.
Okay.
One from the Lieutenant Governor's Office, from Her Excellency Susan Beiswitz, and she states, on this date, the 27th day of June 2024, I take great pleasure in offering my sincerest appreciation to Joanne Ryan, a recognition of your continued commitment to public service and education. In 2 years as chair of the Board of Regents and 4 additional years as a board member, you have helped strengthen the state's higher education system and improve outcomes for students and faculty. Through this role and throughout your career, you have dedicated yourself to building thriving communities. Thank you for your service to your community and to the state of Connecticut. Dated and signed this day, 27th day of June 2024. And I have a second from the Office of the Governor, by His Excellency Ned Lamont, Governor, an official statement. Whereas Joanne M. Ryan, Chairperson of the Board of Regents for Higher Education, the governing body of the Connecticut State Colleges and Universities System, departs this role after a distinguished multi-year tenure. And whereas a graduate of Albertus Magnus College in New Haven and Trinity College in Hartford, where she obtained her master's degree in education, Joanne taught in Torrington and Stanford High Schools and later taught for 10 years as adjunct faculty at Naugatuck Valley Community College and Northwestern Connecticut Community College. And whereas after her career in teaching, Joanne went on to work in different leadership roles at Kelly Services, Inc., and would later on become the president and CEO of the Northwest Connecticut Chamber of Commerce, a position she has held since 2002, and the first woman to achieve this title since the Chamber's inception in 1901. And whereas first appointed to the Board of Regents in 2018 by Governor Daniel Malloy, Joanne later became vice chairperson, served on both the Finance and Infrastructure and Audit Committees, and was appointed as chairperson of the board in 2022. And whereas, under her devoted supervision and direction, Joanne oversaw a momentous transformation of the Connecticut public higher education system in which 17 state higher education institutions were unified under one banner as Connecticut State Colleges and Universities, providing a strategic vision and leaving behind an enduring legacy from which students in our state will benefit for years to come. Now, therefore, I, Ned Lamont, Governor of the State of Connecticut, in recognition of her years of outstanding contributions to our state and in celebration of the many accomplishments achieved under her leadership on this day of Thursday, June 27th, 2024, do hereby officially convey honor upon Joanne M. Ryan in the state of Connecticut.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Those were all supposed to be kept a secret. And I even said to the governor, no nonsense, no fanfare, nothing. We're just moving forward. And so for my final order of business, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Second that.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you so very, very much, and enjoy the summer. Oh my goodness.